Welcome to the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast with me, Susie Vidori, where I peel back the layers of how to wow your readers with your fiction, your nonfiction. Anybody can bang out a first draft, but it takes a little more work to make your book as amazing as it can be. Join me as I share the step-by-step writing techniques you could apply to your writing right away, as I host successful writers who share a behind-the-scenes look at their own writing lives, and as I live coach writers on their pages, giving practical writing examples that will make your own writing stronger. Nobody is born knowing how to write an engaging book. There are real and important skills that you need to learn. On this show, I cut through the noise and get you all the info you need. I can't wait to see how this information is going to transform your writing. This guest that I have here today is such a treat. When I was thinking about doing world building, and then I ran into my good friend and fellow book coach, Gabby, at a conference in Denver, and we started talking about world building. I'm like, you're the one I want to do this episode with. It is so exciting, and we talked so much that we actually turned it into 2 episodes, although we recorded it all in one sitting. It's a lot. So get your pen and paper ready, get your imagination ready, and come and geek out with us about world building. And Gabby is a fantasy writer, but world building applies to absolutely every single genre. We'll talk a little bit about that, and we will show you some ways to incorporate it into your genre as well. Just so that you know, Gabby has the chops to be talking about this. Her official bio states, Gabrielle Kerouac-Byrne writes and edits fantasy in the tangled wilds of the Pacific Northwest. She has a master's degree in literature from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, and a second bachelor's in environmental studies from the Evergreen State College. Gabby loves Thai food, cats, anime, and talking about gelatinous zooplankton. And I promise you, we don't talk about that on this episode, although I probably should have asked her about it. She will 100%, according to her, name your pets if you let her. And when she's not reading, she can be found putting spiny beasties into books or fishing spineless beasties out of the Salish Sea. She's the author of middle grade books, The Rise of the Dragon Moon and The Edge of Strange Hollow. Gabby is represented by T.S. Ferguson and Zancian Literary Agency. Please welcome our special guest, Gabby. Okay, so the food. What about money? What about political systems? How did those sort of cultural elements play into what you need to know about your world? Whether it's a fantasy world or historical fiction or contemporary, but just set in a different country, right? Like all of these things are cool.
They're super cool. And it's so easy to get distracted by how cool they are and by how detailed you can make them, right? And that's a whole skill set unto itself. And it's a whole hobby unto itself to build elaborate, very detailed worlds. But when you're writing a story, the story is what matters. And when I say the story is what matters, what I'm really saying is the character is what matters, right?
Yeah.
What does that character want? What do they need? How are they in opposition to each other? The wants and the needs, right? And how does that want or need carry them through this world, right? Is their want to be extremely wealthy? Well, then your economic system is really important, and so is your power structure system, right? If they think they want to be really wealthy, but really they want to touch God, and so somehow they have to learn over the course of their journey that what they really need in their life is a spiritual existence. Well, then you've got to interplay with a spiritual system and an economic system, right? And so there are going to be elements of both of those things that connect to your character and how they are moving through the world in this scene to scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who are they meeting that brings in these pieces, right? Who are they in relationship with that brings in these parts of this system? If they're using magic, how are they using it in that scene? Are they using it? If they're not using it, if the other characters aren't using it, you don't need it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And the same with tech and science, right? Like you have to make decisions, especially if you're in a different world. Do we have science? Do we not have science, right? Okay. I know that one that you like to talk about as well is to add in, these are all the different elements, but to add in spirituality, right? And it's one that we
one that we missed. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you mean by that and what
Yeah.
writers might consider bringing into that, whether it's
Yeah.
fantasy or in any genre, really?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that spirituality is a really interesting system because it touches everything. And in particular, it touches the emotional core of a person or character, right?
Hmm.
And so it's a really unique opportunity to put them in conflict with themselves or with the people they care about or with their society.
Can
Uh,
you just back up a minute? Because
yeah.
spirituality, I mean, if we're just thinking, oh, do they go to church or not? This is a broader
Yeah, no, no,
topic, right?
no.
Like,
Yeah, correct. Like, so I'll give you an example, and that might be the best way to explain what I'm talking about. So in my first book, which is Rise of the Dragon Moon, I set up a society in which these people pay a tithe to the dragons of their world to keep the dragons from killing them all, right? And they do this in a really sort of reverent way. They really these dragons are like important to their society and they're not worshipped exactly, but they're revered greatly. And these are people who don't have very much and they pay these dragons to not attack them, right? And my character in this book, her father's been killed by dragons, and she is not happy about the way dragons are viewed in her world, right? She doesn't agree with this. She's pissed off. And she thinks we have so little. Why are we giving more to these creatures? Why can't we confront them in some way? Why worship them? Why do I have to give more? And so that sort of basic understanding, and it's spiritual in that impacts the way these creatures are viewed, right? And the way that they're integrated into this village impacts her. It impacts her emotions and it impacts her journey, the place where she starts to the place where she ends. And so I think, just having those sort of spiritual overlays can be really, really powerful. And
yeah,
going
absolutely.
back to economic systems, if somebody is worshipful of money, right? They're not going to church to worship money, or maybe they are, but maybe that's a whole different world, right?
I think those exist.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. But, if somebody worships money, it impacts everything about their character and how they
Scrooge
interact
McDuck.
with others. Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah, the whole Dickens suite of stories, right, is impacted by class and economy, but it
Yeah.
impacts every piece of your life. And spirituality is the same way, whether somebody considers themselves spiritual, considers themselves not spiritual, if they're vehemently atheistic, if they believe that objects have spirits. There's lots of stories like that where objects are imbued with their own spirit. There's lots of different ways to approach that, but I find it really impactful and powerful because it's intended to connect directly to the emotional being of a person, right?
Yeah.
That's its nature.
So, how do you know when world building and your geekery around your world building has taken over the plot or become distracting? Like, how can writers tell if they've
Yeah.
done this poorly?
Yeah.
Because going to be,
Yeah. If you are putting off your storytelling, if you are putting off sitting down and writing your story because you want to explore adjacent landscape or, or you feel like, yeah, I've got this magic system pretty well sorted, but, this one piece of magic, maybe it splits into five and maybe it, works slightly differently. And maybe I should do an essay about that. I think if you're using world building as a distraction to keep you from writing your story, it is time to stop because there is an element of world building that's organic that happens as you're writing. And that's because your character's journey will remain, its nature of writing, somewhat organic. You're going to learn more about that character as you write them. And they are going to tell you, hell no, I am not going to, what is that phrase? Get along to go along?
get along to go along? No.
I'm not gonna get along with this character. I'm not going to, pat the shark in the aquarium. I'm going to do this other thing that you didn't plan for, and good luck with that. And
Yeah.
that's what your character is going to start to do. And then you're going to be like, oh, maybe I do need to know that shark actually doesn't eat people and he speaks Slytherin, whatever. But
Yeah.
the point is, you're following your character, and that is what you need to know from your world building to share with your reader to ground them in the character's journey, in the scenes, right?
Yeah.
There's this classic world building analogy of the iceberg where you've got the part that you share at the very tippy top, and then this enormous amount of stuff you don't share, right? And you only know what you need to share because you're following your character through scenes.
Absolutely. And I think, I always teach, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of outlining, but
Mhm.
outlining and then kind of feeling your way through it, right?
Yeah.
Your outline is not going to include everything, and nor will your world building. Yeah. I mean, your world building will really evolve, and you're going to see connections. And I mean, I'm really into brain science and how it affects your readers and but it works when you're writing as well. Oftentimes I can see, even with another writer's work, there's connections that are there that you can make, that all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I made up this cool magic thing, or I made up this cool world thing. It could fit here in a way that I hadn't thought about before. And it kind of takes it in a different direction.
Right.
You, in
Right.
Gabby's world, the characters are speaking to her. I think that my brain's in control, but both are the same thing, right?
Yeah,
We're kind of
absolutely.
like handsing our way through the middle of the scene.
Yeah,
Which I love.
and also you may stumble into a scene that goes in a slightly different direction, or it brings up a new interaction or a new side character that you need, and suddenly you realize, oh, I really do need to explain this piece of the world. Right. I
Yeah.
really do need to say a few words here about this, or my reader is not going to understand what is happening. And that's how you can step away and develop that piece if that hasn't been developed. So, the idea that you have to understand I mean, we don't understand everything, single thing about Earth. And we have been here
Oh,
for,
speak for yourself. No, just
I know all the things, right? There's no
I
world,
am omniscient.
there is no world in which we know all the things about the world we currently live in.
Yeah.
So to try and explain all the things about the world that you're making up, it's not going to happen. So you have to decide what are the key things that you need to know. And you will not get that 100% right, right? You will learn and grow as you write your story and have to change things or adapt them or develop new things.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that we have you on the podcast, because I want to talk about age group and
Sure.
different techniques. How does world building for adults change for middle grade, for YA? Like, are there differences?
There are differences, but they're not as big as you might believe, right? Part of the difference is the limitation of word count, right? You can only squeeze so much into a 40 to 50,000 word novel. But what is the same is that you are following that character's journey, and you are
Yeah.
grounding your reader, not just in the things that matter for that character's journey, but also, and I think this is really important, in the sensory details, because those are the grounding details. The smells, the food you mentioned, right? The way characters move in space is really, I think, something that I feel is too often overlooked for showing character. And so for middle grade, there's a level of complexity that you might pare down, right? You're obviously not going to wax poetic about the economic system, but kids still fully understand greed, right? They fully understand what it's like to lack something, or to need something and not get it, or to want something and not have it, and other people have it. Or, there's a million different ways to convey meaning in a world, in a system, in an environment that is universal. Doesn't matter how old you are. And all you need to do to capture that is think to yourself, like, when I was 14, how did I feel about holding frogs? How did I feel about the Jordache Jean movement, right? Like, how did I feel about, not being invited to the party,
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if the party is in the spaceship or if the party is in your backyard.
Again, those universal experiences, right?
That's right. Yeah, those
And
emotional moments that translate to
yeah.
the reader.
And I like to say, especially for middle grade, keep it fun, right? Like
Yeah, kids
like,
love humor. Kids
yeah.
love humor.
Like you can actually be bigger, I think, with your magic, with your creatures, with your other things. You can be a little bit more out there. And that's what
I
makes
agree
it
with that.
fun, right?
They're a little bit, I agree. I think they're a little bit more willing to set aside that disbelief,
Yeah.
right? To go with you without you explaining how it all works, right? It just works.
Okay.
And that can be super fun.
Okay. Let's talk about magic. I mean, we talked about magic being a character. We talked a little bit about the systems. How does magic fit into world building? If you're writing fantasy, if
Yeah.
you're using magic. I mean,
Yeah.
other than it being a get out of jail free card, which I love.
One time being a get out of jail free card. And after that, people get mad about it because it's too easy, right? Like, you can't make it too easy. Your characters still have to earn their outcomes, whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
in your story. Yeah, if you have magic in your book, I think the things I run into most frequently with folks is that they're not consistent. They're not using it. There's not rules that are consistent, right? You
Okay.
have to
So
have a
do we
way.
have to have rules?
We do. We do
Okay.
have to have rules. Unless you live in a world that is already sort of established. The rules are already established. And so an example of that is like if you play D&D a lot and you write a story that's sort of in a D&D adjacent world, right? You automatically have the underfill of that world that a lot of readers, any reader who's played D&D will be able to tap into that. Oh yeah, that orc just had a poison bomb and threw it. Like, so you have sort of like a soft magic system where your world is just magic and that's just how it is. And you don't need to say a whole lot about it. It works in the same way. Right. So
Yeah.
you can leverage those things. Same with like what I was talking about earlier with creatures. Like if you've got a vampire in your book, you're leveraging a huge amount of history about vampires that people can
Yeah.
access and do so, readers read. So they've read a lot of vampire stories. If they're reading your vampire story, you can bet they've read other vampire stories, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a system that is really reliably consistent on its face, you don't need to worry quite as much, but it needs to be consistent, and that
I agree.
requires rules.
And I mean, I agree that there are rules, and there's lots of, discussion in literary circles about books that don't have rules,
Yeah.
that we don't know
There's
what
an
the rules
exception
are,
for
and the
every
Lord of the Rings and everything else. But I would argue that we'll go back to your iceberg analogy that
Yeah.
Tolkien knew what was going on because nobody can point out any inconsistencies exactly, but it doesn't
Right.
mean that they are always explained, right? They're
Correct.
mysterious to the
Yeah.
reader.
Yeah.
But yet he managed to write a pretty darned
Yeah.
interesting series, if I do
Yeah.
say so.
Yeah.
And so whatever that is, there was probably a lot of work behind the scenes that didn't end up on the page.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And having rules does not mean describing rules. It means seeing consistency in the way things are used because
And deciding.
yeah,
decisions
that's
for
right.
others.
That's right. So, and some of that too is recognizing that if there are inconsistencies, it relates to character. So, like, you think about the way Gandalf used magic versus the way Thoron, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're both wizards. They both use magic. They both have access to the same magic system. And it works in similar ways, but they use it differently, right?
Yeah.
But it's not,
Actually, we all are different, right?
yeah. But you don't read that and go, hey, wait a second. Didn't Gandalf just, turn his pipe into fireworks last week and now he can't do it anymore because, I mean, I don't know. This is a terrible analogy, but the point is,
Hate mail from all the fans.
like, why are you talking about Gandalf? You don't know.
I'm rescuing you here. I kind of am loving this process.
No need. I'll just own. I think Gandalf uses magic consistently,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. And that's really important. And then I also feel like there always has to be a cost. There always has to be a cost for magic.
And limits, right? Limits, cost.
Exactly. Yeah. There has to be a boundary. You can't just solve all the problems with magic because that ticks off readers really fast. And again, like readers read, they know what a system that works should look like. Even if you're asking them to put aside disbelief in some very important ways, if you're asking them to do that consistently, they'll go with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the limits are really important. I know I teach magic in the school systems, and when I go into a room, I'll say to kids, when we want to talk about the limitation piece of it, I'll say, okay, I'm Susie Vidori, author, and I just arrived. And unfortunately, I hate to tell you that you're all in mortal danger. But don't worry, because I have the power to save you all right now. And then I snap my fingers and I say, you're saved. Was that an interesting story? No, right? Now I go out of the room, I come back, I say, okay, let's try this again. I'm Susie Vidori, author. Unfortunately, you're back in mortal danger. And I do have the power to save you, but I can only save one person every month for the rest of until you're all saved. So who would like to be saved first? And then they all say, hey, right? Like, now we have a story. Like, how am I going to decide? And Squid Games with children. Yeah. Like, how are we going to decide how I do that? Because my power all of a sudden has a limit, right? And it's not to get a card.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's very simple, right? Like you're limited by time. And you're limited by usually some kind of source, right? Like your magic comes from somewhere and you can limit that source. Your magic happens in a certain time or in a certain place or through a certain series of actions or words, right? Your magic is attached to an object that's required for that magic, or that object is magic in itself. Right. There's lots of different sort of ways to approach it, but all of those things have limitations.
Yeah, and I think you need to know that source, right? And that's where, sometimes there's lots of different things. It could be magical creatures. It could be divine beings or higher powers and that spiritual side of things. It could be, like you said, an object, like superheroes.
Either way with your plot too, right? Like if your character's magic is tied to an object and they lose that object or that object is stolen, that is that's a huge piece of your story.
Yeah.
Right. As would be where that object came from, its origin.
Right? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be super original. I mean, look at Popeye eats spinach and becomes strong. Like, I told you that you were going to have like a gajillion-dollar franchise like Popeye was in the day with a character who gets its magic from spinach. I mean, like, come on, it can be anything, right? Like, that's the fun of this.
It can be anything, but it works because readers know what to expect and they understand where it's coming from, right? So as soon as Popeye gets that can of spinach out, you're like, oh, here it comes. Here it comes.
Yeah.
And on those rare occasions when something happens that prevents him from eating the spinach, oh my gosh, right? Like, that's a terrible thing that happens and we all feel that. And it's tapping into that universal understanding of a situation, of a feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So one of the biggest mistakes that I find newer writers make when they're trying to write magic is that their magic is just too darn subtle. Like, it's like buried in the middle of a paragraph, or they have magic where, they just think it's implied. What's your best advice? Like, do you see this as well with writers that you work with, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, I think that's symptomatic of them not understanding their magic, right?
Yeah.
Because I think when you start to think about what are the limitations and the costs, what is the origin of this magic? What is its source? If it's an object, where does that object, was it gifted to you by your mother? Was it handed down over generations? Did you find it in the garden? Did you pick it up at a flea market? Did you know it was magic? Did you not know it was magic? So all of those sort of character-based questions will impact your plot, probably, right? But also will impact how that magic gets used.
Yeah. And again, listeners, listen up. What Gabby just said, you write it in a separate document. You do not make that a chapter answering all these questions about your magic. And you bring it in as needed. But I like to say as well, like, make it big and make it weird. It is magic, so you don't want it to feel too familiar. if you have a cerebral magic where I think something and then it happens, and I think something and then it happens, and the reader says, well, was that a coincidence or was it magic? We don't want them to miss it. Like, give it a color, give it a smell, give it a sound, give it a tingling feeling, give it something. Make
Yeah,
it
I
3D,
love
make it
that.
3D, right? We want to
Well,
experience it.
magic is inherently it's unfamiliar because we don't get to have it, right? And so if you're giving us a gift, if you're giving us a gift of magic in your story, yeah, make it a good gift. Make it a gift we want to get. I don't necessarily, I mean, there are lots of stories like you think about sort of the alternate world. I'm thinking like maybe, I mean, X-Men, super big, right? Big magic.
Yeah.
But even some of I don't even know what they're called. They're not exactly police procedurals, but they're sort of the metaphysical where somebody is psychic and they can see the future, they can see what's happening, right? That's a form of magic that's working consistently, but it is a gift because we are with that character and seeing it
Yeah.
happen. And we're getting enough of the negative impact, the cost of that magic, right? That is also, in a weird way, that's also part of the gift, right? It's what they gain from it and also what they lose from it. And so I think when you have those subtler magics, if you can take a minute, take a beat, right? And write a character experience in first person about, how this magic impacted them in a good way and how it impacted them in a bad way, and then rewrite that subtle scene, it's going to get one, less subtle, which it should be. And
Yeah.
two, even through interiority, right? Even through that character's emotional
Inner
response
voice.
to what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the gift that you're giving your reader, is that experience of both the advantages and disadvantages of this
The
system, this magic.
Yeah, the gift of magic. That is going to stay with me for a long time. It's going to stay with listeners too. Thank you. The gift of your presence, the gift of this conversation. We've made it to the quick fire round.
Oh
Are you
my
ready?
gosh. Oh, quick fire. Yay. Okay.
Okay.
I'm ready.
I know you've studied for this one. Okay. How long did it take you to write your first book from the idea to publication?
Oh my gosh. Well, my first book was not my first publication, is the short answer.
Okay.
So my first book took me 4 days because I wrote it in response to a contest.
You might win this. You might win this. I don't think I've ever heard 4 days. I love it.
It was a contest, and I'm struggling to remember what it was called. It was like way back in the early aughts. And it was, write a novel. It might have even been early NaNoWriMo. It was write a book over Labor Day weekend. Good luck.
Oh my gosh.
So it was
So
long.
4 days to write the first draft, but how long until it was published?
Oh gosh. Well, and that book has never seen the light of day, nor should it ever see the light of day, right?
Okay.
The book that I first got published, I wrote it was probably a year and a half and it was Dragon Moon is my debut. And I wrote that 3 or 4 times before I and my agent was happy with it. It was the third book we had gone out on submission with. The book I got my agent on, it probably took me closer to 6 or 8 months to write. Yeah.
Now, listeners, when you're listening, these are middle grade books. They're 40
Correct.
to 50,000 words, right? So they're like they're smaller books than what you might be writing. So don't compare.
I will also say, like they gained many words over the course of working with my agent and with editors. So Dragon Moon started out at like 50,000 and ended up almost 80, which
Okay, so they
would
were
not
longer.
sell today, right? Because
Yeah.
today it's much shorter is what is selling. But yeah.
Okay. What was your first big break?
My first big break was being chosen as a Pitch Wars mentee. I think it was 2015.
Okay.
And it was a break not in the way that you might expect it to be. It was a break because of the community that I built there, the writing community that I built there, and the support that I found in my writer community and the critique partners that gave me.
Which is inadvertently how we know one another as well.
Correct.
Through
Yeah,
that
yeah,
network.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would argue that my other big break was attending my first writer conference, because they had an agent pitch panel, which I did get some requests out of the pitch panel, but that also was not the break. The break was the moment when I realized, oh, you can write something people might want to read, and there's a path in that, right?
Yeah.
Like from like that, like isolated writing a book in my room to that realization that like, oh, I can follow this path and work, hard. And if I practice and if I am persistent, and if I am patient, and those are the 3 Ps that I talk about in my work with clients a lot. Like if you have to be persistent, you have to practice and you have to be patient. And if I do those things, then I have a chance for people to read what I'm writing.
Oh, I just love that both of your answers there are community. It's what I aspire to create here with my inspired writing community, with all of those things, to be that place for
Mhm.
writers to be like, huh, this is doable, and I'm going to have people support along the way. And the reason I started the podcast was to kind of peel back those layers and to share these stories so that people could see how it
Yeah.
worked for other people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Do
that's
you
the
mind if,
interesting piece.
yeah,
Like that's the piece because the book journey, it's different for every book. The publishing market changes constantly. There are always, it doesn't matter if you are, self-published, indie published, trade published, if you're a bestseller, you're going to have disappointments and you're going to have difficulties and you're going to have successes. And your community that you build is what smooths that out so that it's a part of your life and it feels
yeah,
like who you are and not a moment in time where you're judged and measured.
amazing. And the third quickfire question, which I
Oh
think
yeah.
you just answered, is your best advice for writers starting out? You had the
Yeah.
3 Ps, you had the
Uh-huh.
community. Anything else
Yeah.
that you want to share again?
Just keep going. I mean, that's my advice in writing as it is in life, right? Don't give up because
Just keep swimming,
just keep
swimming, swimming.
swimming. I mean, it's so true. And it's hard work. It's hard. And your community will remind you that it's hard and that they're there. And you will gain so much from approaching it with joy. I think that's
Yeah,
my last piece of
so
advice
worth it.
because
Approach it with joy.
yeah,
Love that.
yeah, do it because you love it and don't be outcome based. Enjoy the process of it because that's again lasting.
And
That
the
and your
rest will come.
community. Yeah. Mhm.
The rest will come. Okay. This has been absolutely amazing, Gabby. When listeners listen to
It's been
this and want to hear more from you, where can we find you?
Yeah, so my website is the best place to find me. It is GKBYRNE, GK Byrne
And we will
Books.
drop that. We will
Yeah,
drop that in the links in the show
yeah, that's
notes.
awesome. And then people can subscribe to my newsletter and to hear more from me, and I would love that. It also gives them access to my intro package, so that can be helpful for folks too if they want to try out working with me. Yeah, and
Amazing. I
love
mean,
it.
definitely work with Gabby. She's incredible. So glad to have her in my network. Thanks for coming on the show today, Gabby. We're going to have you back again soon.
Oh, good. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Show Don't Tell Writing podcast with me, Susie Vidori. It is my absolute honor to bring you the straight goods for that book you're writing or the book that you're planning to write. Please help me keep the podcast going by helping people find us. You can subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening to show how much you enjoy the show. That's how other listeners will find us. Also, visit susievidori.com/newsletter to hop on my weekly inspired writing newsletter list, where you'll stay inspired and be the first to know about all the upcoming training events and writing courses that happen in my community. Want my eyes on your writing? Submit a page of your current draft for a chance to come on the podcast at the link in the show notes. I'd love to chat with you about your writing in my always positive, incredibly supportive way so that you can make great strides towards your writing goals. I'm here to cheer you on. Remember, that book you're writing is going to open doors that you haven't even thought of yet, and I can't wait to help you make that it the absolute best it can be. See you again right here next week. Hi, writer. Want my support to get your book finished and out into the world? Join my Inner Circle membership, a community of supportive writers where each month we set goals, share pages, learn new techniques, and get you unstuck fast so that you can make continuous progress on your writing goals. Coached Writers Finish. And you can get me as your virtual book coach in this group program for only $199 a month, much less than a single one-on-one coaching session. Check out the details at susiebedori.com/inner circle. We have live events happening all the time, so grab your spot now to join us.